Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at Ranger Cleric multi-class ideas. And the basic concept here is if you've ever played a martial cleric, like especially the ones that get the divine strike ability, you've realized that clerics can actually hit fairly hard, especially at higher levels. The problem is you only have the one attack around. So my basic idea here is to take a cleric and try to just get a little more martial power out of them. And I've done videos in the past where we took a look at things like, say, picking up the magic initiate feat or multi-classing into somebody else's class where we could get like the booming blade or the green flame blade cantrips and then use that as our one attack. So now we get our scaling damage from the cantrip. We're also getting our divine strike ability, and that's not a bad way to go at all. I've also looked at multi-classing with fighter, which again is a great fit. Starting fighter will give us constitution saving throws. It can give us abilities like action surge. If we go to level 6, we can even get another ability score increase. And if you went Eldritch Knight, you can even have a couple levels of spell casting in there, because that's really the big drawback of going fighter, that it's not contributing at all to our spell casting. And 6 levels is a fairly substantial diversion from our cleric, right? So that is a lot of delayed progress. Another option, though, is to go with one of the other martials. Now, obviously, Barbarian is probably not going to be our best fit. Not that Barbarian couldn't work, but I did a video previously where I multi-classed Barbarian and Warlock. But the Barbarian, while raging, can't cast spells or concentrate on spells. That's kind of an issue for the Cleric. With the Warlock, it really wasn't, because I was looking to pre-cast like an Armor of Agathis, and now when I rage, that spell's going to last twice as long, because I'm only taking half damage, but it's still reflecting the full damage. And then I'm going to use Eldritch Smites with the rest of my spell slots, so it doesn't matter that I'm raging. That's not really the case here. So Barbarian's not going to be my best fit. Paladin, great option. We have Smites, we've got a lot from Paladin class. However, Paladin has one huge drawback, and that's that we need Charisma. In order to multi-class in or out of Paladin, you're going to need 13 Strength and 13 Charisma. Cleric's going to need 13 Wisdom. And Paladins aren't really known for being ranged damage dealers, which isn't bad, right? Like, we might want to be a frontline guy, which is fine. But if we are, we're probably going to need a little Constitution as well. And if you're trying to have a high enough strength to be able to use your weapon effectively, with a decent charisma for your saving throw bonuses at level 6, and for your cleric and for your paladin spells, and wisdom for your cleric spells, and some constitution, that's a pretty heavy investment. And that brings us to Ranger, because we've already covered fighter. Ranger alleviates a lot of these issues. Number one, it's going to use dexterity, but it's also going to use, well, I mean, probably dexterity, but it's also going to use wisdom as its casting stat, which is the same as we're going to need for cleric. You might not need as much constitution if you're playing a ranged character as well. You could be sitting back, firing off with your bow. Maybe you only need 12 or 14 con in that case. It's not really going to be as heavy of an investment. And you're in a pretty good spot then. You have a few less stats you have to worry about. You can focus on your dexterity and your wisdom, and you're probably going to be all right. Ranger also adds some other nice perks. Number one, the fact that you get some access to some great spells like Goodberry and Pass Without Trace. These are very welcome additions to your cleric spell list. But also, if you were looking to add some damage to your cleric, which is the whole purpose for this video, Hunter's Mark is a great first level spell that really fits that kind of role. We also get some nice fighting style options. Tasha gives us some new ones, but we might want to just go with the archery fighting style. If we're going to be using a bow, hard to beat that. And now you've got a Ranger, Cleric, multi-class. We were able to get second attack. You've got the fighting style. You've got one casting stat for everything. You still have a separate attack stat, so not always the best, but still a lot better than we were looking at with Paladin. And even as a fighter, we would have had to need strength anyway, so, not the end of the world there, right? I think that Ranger also gives us a lot of subclasses that can all add bonus damage to our attacks, or even give us extra attacks. There's 3 that can add damage to weapon attacks in different ways, and then there's 2 that give us extra attacks. But one of them is the Gloomstalker, which also adds extra damage to that attack. Kind of double purpose there. So there's a lot of subclass options. For the Cleric, basically anything with the Divine Strike is what I'm kind of looking towards, right? I mean, it could even be Life Cleric if you wanted to really make the most out of Goodberry, for example. You could go Trickery Domain. You could go with War Cleric, of course, and then use Sharpshooter, help, with the plus 10 to your attack to help compensate for that. The one I'm going to be looking at in this video specifically, though, is going to be the new Twilight Domain Cleric. And that's mostly because we've never done a Twilight Domain video yet. But I'm not saying Twilight Domain is the best one to take. I'm just saying that it's really, really solid. You're getting the Divine Strike ability. And I think it has some really nice advantages as well. Just some great domain features, So it's really good. For the Ranger, let's start with the 2 that gives the extra attack. Like I said, obviously we have the Gloomstalker. In the first round, we got the Dread Ambusher ability. We're going to be able to get a bit of extra movement even, which is nice. We get an extra attack in that first round of combat, and that attack deals an extra 1d8 damage. So that's pretty much perfect for what we're looking for. Extra attack and extra damage. At level 5 Ranger, we're going to have 2 attacks around. That's starting to get to be pretty good. We might even go 6 levels of Ranger if we really wanted, you could do it that way too. But either way, between 5 and 8 is probably what I'm looking for, depending on if I want the ability score increase. So that's going to be a pretty good mix. The Hunter does something similar. You could take Colossus Slayer, but I kind of like the Horde Breaker ability in this case a little more, because if I'm going to be using something like, say, Sharpshooter, I'd rather have the extra attack where it gives me another opportunity to apply that extra Sharpshooter damage. Not that Colossus Slayer is bad, I'm just saying for this character, I'm probably going to prefer Horde Breaker. Now, overall, I think the Gloomstalker ability is better, the Dread Ambusher. However, Horde Breaker does have one important advantage that the Dread Ambusher doesn't. It also has some weaknesses. Obviously, it needs another target within 5 feet of the first target. Unlike the Dread Ambush, where you can just do your extra attack on whatever target you want, and that target takes the extra damage, which really can allow you to tunnel down one powerful foe if you want. Horde Breaker is useless if you don't have another creature within 5 feet of your target. So that's not exactly great. However, if you do have an extra target within 5 feet, you can use that ability multiple rounds of the combat, whereas the Dread Ambusher is only in the first round. And this is where the Hunter can sort of claw back some of that early advantage that the Gloomstalker has. So I think both are really solid choices. The Gloomstalker, though, has another advantage, which is that they also get their Wisdom bonus to their initiative roll. And since you're probably going to have a good Wisdom, since you're going Cleric, that's going to be a nice ability as well. And then you've got the other 3. You've got your Fey Wanderer, your Monster Slayer, and your Horizon Walker. And all of them kind of fulfill a similar purpose, which is that we're going to have an ability at level 3 that boosts our weapon damage on 1 attack per turn. All of them do it slightly differently, with different advantages and weaknesses. The Horizon Walker, you're going to get an extra 1d8 damage to 1 attack against 1 target. That damage, all your damage is converted to force, and you do the extra 1d8 on top of it. It's a 30-foot range, it's a bonus action. It's decent, but the fact that it's a bonus action does mean it might compete with something like a Hunter's Mark or a Spiritual Weapon, which we might be wanting to use as well. So while it's the hardest hitting of the abilities, it's not my favorite. Monster Slayer, kind of similar feature actually. We're going to have a bonus action, 1 target, 60 feet, 1d6 damage, but it ends if we take a short rest or designate a different creature. Now the nice thing about this is that we can just designate different creatures all the time, and so you could always be doing that in every combat. Unfortunately though, it's using our bonus action, which is going to compete with a Hunter's Mark or a Spiritual Weapon a lot. And now that doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of the world. Like, we could be stacking them. If you're fighting one powerful creature, you could be putting your Hunter's Mark on it and then the next round you're just doing the Hunter's Mark damage, but now you're adding on your Monster Slayer damage, right? So now you're doing the 2d6 on that attack, and then 1d6 on your other attack from the Hunter's Mark, right? So you could stack them up, but now you're kind of having to layer them in multiple rounds. This is kind of where I like the Fey Wanderer ability the best, even though it's only 1d4 damage. It's an action to activate, but it infuses your weapon with the extra damage, not the target. So for every combat that you're in, your weapon just does that extra 1d4 damage on one hit each turn. And the fact that it's not requiring more bonus actions, I'm not having to move it from one target to another, means that I can use something like a Hunter's Mark at its full effectiveness. So I think that's a very good ability as well. And unlike, say, the Gloomstalker or the Hunter, where there are specific limitations, maybe it's only the first round, or maybe I need a target within 5 feet, this one's just going to apply once per turn, every round, basically forever, right? So I think it's a really solid option too. But mostly just pick the one you like the best and kind of go with it. For the clerics, like I said, again, we want a domain that's going to have the extra damage to our weapon attacks, because that's kind of the whole purpose here, just adding more damage to our cleric. So I think that really any of them are going to do well in that regard. But like I said, I haven't looked at the Twilight Domain Cleric yet. We have looked at like Life and War and some of these others. And Trickery, actually. Tempest I haven't done yet, though. Tempest we'll have to do at some point here. So I figure we'll go over the Twilight Domain Cleric abilities really briefly here. Your spells. Level 1, you get Fairy Fire and Sleep. Fairy Fire is excellent. Sleep is great at low levels, but falls off very quickly. So if you started Ranger and decided to go to extra attack as fast as possible, by the time you go Cleric, Sleep's going to be worthless. But if you started Cleric, Sleep's going to be okay. Good. Level 3, you get Moonbeam and See Invisibility. Decent. Level 5, though, you get Aura of Vitality and Lehman's Tiny Hut, both excellent spells to have on your domain list. Level 7, Aura of Life and Greater Invisibility. Again, pretty good spells. And level 9, Circle of Power and Mislead. Level 1, you get your bonus proficiencies of martial weapons and heavy armor. This is a little redundant with the Ranger, but, whatever, we can live with it. We also get the Eyes of Night feature at level 1. And this is really good. Unfortunately, it does kind of make the Gloomstalker Dark Vision redundant, but it's so much better that it's fine. We can live with it. We didn't go Gloomstalker for the Dark Vision anyway. Although I do think that Gloomstalker Ranger and Twilight Domain Cleric, nice roleplay potential there. Let's not overlook that. Basically, you have Dark Vision to 300 feet, and as an action, you can magically share the Dark Vision with willing creatures within 10 feet of you. You can see up to a number of creatures equal to your Wisdom modifier. Your shared Dark Vision lasts for 1 hour. Once you share it, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest, unless you expend a spell slot of any level to share it again. Once you're high level and you don't have much to do with your first level spell slots, your whole party can have Dark Vision to 300 feet. If you're in like an Underdark campaign or something, that is insane. I mean, even if you're not, it's insane. But, depending on the campaign, that could just be, so good. And it's a level 1 ability. But we're not done. You have another level 1 ability still. And that is Vigilant Blessing. As an action, you can touch one willing creature, and including yourself. You can touch yourself. Although some deities do not approve of you touching yourself, so be aware of that. You give them advantage on their next initiative roll, and it ends immediately after the roll, or if you use it on a different creature. But you could essentially just give one willing party member, including yourself, permanent advantage on all your initiative rolls. And if you want a Gloomstalker, you will not only have permanent advantage, but you'll also have your Wisdom bonus added to your initiative roll. And probably a decent Dex bonus on top of that. So you will be fast as lightning. Or maybe you want to use it on somebody like a wizard who wants to use a lot of battlefield control spells. The fact that you can designate the target really makes this ability, takes it from a really solid good ability and makes it a great ability in my opinion. I really like that feature a lot. Level 2, we're only level 2, we've already gotten all this much. uh, you get your channel divinity. So as an action, you can create a sphere centered on you, 30-foot radius, and the sphere moves with you, lasts for 1 minute or until you're incapacitated or die, which I don't recommend. Whenever a creature, including you, ends its turn in the sphere, you can grant that creature one of these benefits. It gains temporary hit points equal to 1d6 plus your cleric level, or you can end one effect on it, causing it to be charmed or frightened. So, end one charmed or frightened effect on it. There. Personally, I think both those abilities are excellent. The fact that it's 30 feet means that I could be using a bow while still buffing my frontliners and just giving them temporary hit points every round of this combat. And yeah, it's my channel divinities, so not going to be every combat, but pretty amazing ability, honestly. Especially if you have like a barbarian and they're raging and now they're getting temporary hit points every round, but because they're raging, those hit points are essentially doubled. That ability is absolutely insane. And the fact that you could use it to cancel out a charm or frightened condition on a party member, just like retroactively essentially, is also a great ability. Anyways, at level 6, you get Steps of Night. As a bonus action, when you're in dim light or darkness, you can magically give yourself a flying speed equal to your walking speed for 1 minute. You can use this bonus action a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So, a number of times per long rest equal to your proficiency bonus, you can have flight with no concentration requirement. This is pretty awesome. Now, it is only in dim light or darkness, so you're not, well, I was about to say you're not going to be using it in the day, but you could be using it in the day if you're in the Underdark. See where we're going with all this? But, you know, even if you're not in the Underdark, dim light or darkness, concentrationless flight, level 6, is pretty excellent. Lasts a minute, nothing wrong with that. Great ability. At level 8, of course, we're going to get the Divine Strike ability, and that's where we can add the extra damage to our melee weapon, or not, sorry, martial weapon, our weapon attacks. And it's radiant, which is nice, very rarely resisted, and even more rarely, things might be vulnerable to it. Not a lot, but there are some cases where things are vulnerable to radiant damage. I can't think of a lot of examples where anything's vulnerable to poison damage, for example. Level 17, you get Twilight Shroud. Probably not going to go high enough to get it, but whatever. The Twilight that you summon offers a protective embrace. You and your allies have half cover while in the sphere created by your Twilight Sanctuary ability. So, you know, just adds half cover to your already awesome channel divinity. Nothing wrong with that. Overall, I really, really like, I think all the new cleric domains are actually really good from Tasha's. But I really like the idea of the Twilight Domain Cleric with the Gloomstalker Ranger. I think there's just a nice kind of theme there. But don't feel like you have to use these two. And that's kind of one of the points I wanted to make in this video when I brought all this up. Which is that, really, I think any of these different subclasses we've mentioned can all be good. And so it's really more a case of just the two classes synergize very well together, and then it's just picking the subclass that we want to play from each one. And I think that's kind of neat. I do want to make one final note, though, which is that I really feel anytime you're looking at like 5, 6, 7, 8 levels of one class, and then everything else into another class, I really want a campaign where I'm getting to like a fairly decent level. If my campaign is only going to level 7, I'm probably not going to use this kind of build. Like, I'm just probably not, because it's just not getting time to like breathe, if you know what I'm saying, right? If I have 5 levels of Ranger, but I mostly wanted to play a Cleric, and we only went to level 7, that only leaves me with 2 levels of Cleric, right? That's not really what I was looking for. You know, maybe I just take 2 levels of Fighter and go Cleric the rest of the way then, right? And just realize that, hey, it's not going to get to high enough level to really do it. Maybe I just play something different. Maybe I take like Paladin, pick up a couple levels of Hexblade Warlock, and now I've got Charisma as my 1 stat for everything, and I could even take some nice invocations like an Eldritch Blast with Agonizing Blast to help compensate for my lack of good ranged options as a Paladin, right? You know, maybe I just play something different. But in a campaign where, like, let's say we're playing Prince of the Apocalypse or Out of the Abyss, you know, something along those lines, or the DM said, hey, I've got my homebrew campaign, and I expect us to get to like level like 15, 18, maybe even 20, right? Then like builds like this really start to become very good, because you have access to a lot of the front end loaded ranger abilities, which is really funny to me. Like, when the player's handbook came out, rangers were kind of considered one of the weaker classes. I mean, most of the Beastmaster, but even Hunter didn't get a lot of love necessarily. It was definitely considered the best of the two. And apparently, Wizards of the Coast decided to fix that by just giving rangers in all their expansion books a ton of good low-level abilities. Which just really makes it even more tempting to just take 5 or 6 levels of ranger and then just get out, in my opinion. But whatever. But yeah, so I mean, you get a lot of good front-end ranger abilities. You get the extra attack. You get a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about in this video. And then we're just adding all the greatness of the cleric on top of that. And I don't by any means feel like you need to multi-class clerics, right? Cleric is just a great base class all the way through. But if you do want to say, hey, I really don't like spamming like Toll the Dead or Sacred Flame every round, and I find that in combat, I just don't hit as hard as I want to, you know? That's when these kind of builds are really, really fun to play. Because you could take a sharpshooter, you can take your archery fighting style to help you overcome the -5 penalty, and now anytime you would have Sacred Flamed, you're like, no, I'm going to attack with my bow twice this round, or maybe 3 times this round if I took Hunter or Gloomstalker. And, you know, that's just giving me all those chances to apply extra damage. I'm hitting really hard, but I've still got really good heals. I've got my buffs and blesses and stuff. I have a few summoning spells that I can use, including things like Conjure Celestial or a Planar Ally, both of which are amazing spells. You know, I've got all the goodness of the cleric. I've got things like Sacred Weapon. I might be using a Spirit Guardians. Maybe I use a bow some of the time, but I can still drop a Spirit Guardians in some fights, you know? Why not? Just the fact that you have so many different options of things that you can do, and the fact that the one weakness the clerics generally had is that they just don't hit particularly hard, and you can kind of overcome that with these types of builds. And that's really what I'm looking at. Basically, like I said, in my mind, the way to look at it is adding damage to my cleric, not really like adding cleric to ranger. Because even if I start ranger and go straight to level 5, get extra attack, that's mostly just there as that base core mechanic, and then I'm going cleric the rest of the way. And as I get to higher levels, and my cleric spells start becoming better and better and better, I'm probably going to start transitioning more to being a caster, because I'm going to have more options. Doesn't mean I'm never going to use my bow anymore, or my great sword, or my 2-weapon fighting, or whatever I decide to go with, right? It just means that as I have more options, you know, now I have more things I can do with this character. And so I think it's a really, really solid mix. So anyways, that's everything I have for this video. Feel free to like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, all that kind of stuff. But most importantly, leave me your comments in the comments section. I love reading other people's experiences and their ideas. Maybe they've played similar characters. Maybe they haven't. And they're like, man, I hadn't thought of this combination, but now I really want to try it. Whatever the case might be, you know? Maybe people are like, I tried it and it was awesome. Or I tried it and I thought it was good, but I had some weaknesses, or I had some certain level ranges where maybe I felt like I was struggling a little bit. And those kind of experiences are great too. I love hearing a lot of actual play experiences. Whenever possible for my own videos, I draw from things I've actually played myself, or that I've seen people playing at my games, so if I've been a Dungeon Master. Of course, the problem is that I DM a lot, and I don't necessarily have the chance to play all the characters that I want to play. And, you know, so I spend a lot of time theory crafting too, right? So I find that both are useful, but, you know, a lot of times what works in your head doesn't necessarily translate as well to the table. So it's nice to hear other people's experiences if they've done something similar, or, you know, see what they've tried and whatnot, right? But anyways, that's everything I have. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Bye.